Alright, I've decided to come up with a better way to hang this Trek crisscross bike. I don't know what the proper term for it is. It's like a commuting bike, a little bit capable of trail work because of the type of tires and the front and rear shock absorbers, but it's not a mountain bike either. I've had this for a long time, and I recently had it worked on. I hadn't really ridden it in probably at least 10 years. And big problem has always been it takes up too much room on the floor of the garage. It's pretty tightly packed when I have both cars in here. So I had it hanging by a hook. And the problem with that is that as I was getting older, it was getting harder to get it down from the hooks, reaching high up overhead. And so I got the bike lift. This seemed like the best one from the reviews and data I was able to get online. It's the Delta brand. It's supposed to be made in the US. I'm not sure if that's true. They say something on their website about US company, stocked and supported. I don't remember if they actually said made in the US. Anyway, holds up to 100 pounds. Safely lift your bike and other items up off the ground. Pre-assembled, easy adjustment to fit any size bike. Great for e-bikes. Utility straps to hold larger items such as a kayak, a ladder, etc. Auto-locking mechanism prevents accidental release. And they show it's, you know, good for bikes, it's good for ladders, kayaks, cargo boxes, etc. And really all you have to do is mount a few screws through the rail. A lot of them don't have rails. I thought the rail was a plus on this. And then it's good to go. So the biggest problem is I need it to get really up out of the way in my garage. I've got these Raycor ceiling storage lifts, a couple of them. I've done a video on that some years ago, and really the only place where it's not in the way of something else is this spot right here. I'd like to be able to lift it so the handlebars are up in there and the seat is up in there, and the wheels will be hanging down to a point where I can walk under it without banging my head on the bottom of the wheels. And I figured I could make that work as long as I can get the handlebars inside of this beam and the seat inside of this beam and fit it into this width. That board sticking out could go over a little bit, but it's not sticking out very far beyond the edge of my Raycor hoist here. There's plenty of room for the bike in that width, I think. Anyway, I figure that I don't have a plumb bob here handy, but if I straighten the bike out, which if it'll cooperate, it looks like there is just enough room for the handlebars to go up between the hose reel and the Raycor hoist there. As long as I hang it in the right position so that it goes up straight between those, it should fit. I probably will have to push this, well, maybe not. I think the handlebars will go in front of that. So yeah, I think it'll work. The trick is that to get the height, everything above the tires or above the front fork is going to be up above these rafters. The majority of the bike, the top part of the bike will be up in there, and then only the wheels will be down in this area. And I did a measurement. If I can get it up that high, then the tires, the bottom of the tires will be above my head when I'm walking around here. So here's the product. It has a steel channel, almost like unistrut. So you've got your hooks on pulleys, 2 sets of them. They pivot, so you have some flexibility in how they hook onto things. Each one has a pulley, and they'll go this way due to the way the pulleys are oriented. So you've got the cable coming up, the cord coming up, going over and then hanging down to this pulley, and then going straight across to this pulley, which you'll slide over to here, and then this pulley will hang down there, and also the cord coming up will anchor at that point. So you just adjust these 3 wherever you need to go for best fit, and go from there. And there's quite a long cord here. It's supposed to be more than enough to have this mounted 12 feet up and still have plenty of cord to get down to the floor or whatever you're hooking onto. And it's not just bikes, it could be kayaks and things which would be sitting on the floor and thereby lower quite a bit than a typical bike. So I've heard they give you way too much cord for most installations, and people have ended up cutting it off. Supposedly there is something in here about not cutting the cord. Do not cut excess cord. Well, if it's a pain in the ass, then you might want to cut the excess cord. But the trick is with this kind of thing, you'd cut it cleanly and then you'd fuse the end with a flame or put some glue on it or something so it doesn't come unraveled. And then it should be fine. It should also be possible to replace this with a different cord if you don't like the cord they give you. I read some reviews where they said this cord was too springy. It is a little bit, but it doesn't seem like it's, you know, it's not like a rubber band either. The instructions are basically just mount this on a beam or onto a ceiling joist or whatever, but it does need to be anchored along its entire length for structural integrity. If you have to mount it between 2 beams or joists, then you need to put a board there and then screw this onto the board. There's 4, 5, 6, 7 screws they give you. Some reviews I've read said that those tend to strip out easily. They are, I thought they were aluminum because of how light they are. It's not the first time I've received a bag of screws that felt like they're way too light to be steel, including the Bicycle hoists I've got here. The screws on those were ridiculously lightweight and they were not ferric. I put them on magnets and they didn't seem to be attracted. So I actually, when I installed these, I went out and bought equivalent bona fide steel mounting hardware and used it. This is not holding anywhere near the kind of weight, and as long as they don't strip out, I'll probably be okay using these. A couple of the screws are actually for this. This is where you would put it on the wall and then tie up the cord to anchor it so it doesn't drop down. Although you could probably fiddle with this and get it to lock there, but I wouldn't want to walk around under something that's only being held by this. And then you get the bag of straps. There's 2 nylon straps that you can wrap around things and then hook onto the hooks. So really, for my installation, what I need to do is be absolutely sure where I'm trying to put the bike, this way and this way, and then get up into there on the ladder and mark it off exactly where I have to put it. And it's not a highly peaked roof, but obviously I won't be able to just mount this rail on those rafters. They're not too far apart, but they are too far apart to anchor all the screws. I could probably get 2 screws in and that'd be it. So I would need to put a board between them, but because of the slope, the thing, instead of like this, it's going to be like this, and I don't know how well the cord will play out of the pulleys that way, so I would need to come up with some sort of a shim arrangement to get a horizontally level surface to mount this on, and that shouldn't be too difficult. The other consideration in my instance is that there isn't an obviously good place to tie the cord off to. I've recently reorganized my garage such that these two fiberglass ladders live here instead of way over in the corner with my other ladders behind the personnel door to the garage. And I think the ladders will be in the way of trying to tie the cord off. I thought if I could get it over far enough I could mount it on the wall here, but I can't go that far to the left. And really going over and putting it on this, it would probably work, but it really needs to go onto the wall stud. It needs to go about here. That means, you know, I could probably reach through the ladder and untie it and, you know, make it work that way. But I'll probably end up doing something a little different with how I have the ladders stored here. Alright, I'm getting a bubble level on my digital protractor, trying to get the bubble centered. And it looks like it's about 18 degrees. So that isn't too bad. Okay, I'm going to need a 50-inch span. It's going to go from that rafter up to this one. Those joists are on approximately 16-inch centers, although not exactly. It's a little bit off. Those are, you know, they're not 2x4s, they're 2x-whatevers, but they are 1.5 inches wide, and it's 50 inches approximately from the left side of that one to the right side of that one. So I'm going to span those, and to that end I pulled out of my pile of scrap lumber this here. It's 1 inch by 1.75 inches, and that should be just about ideal for this. It's a 1/4 inch wider than this rail, and I definitely have enough length of it to span those rafters. And if I was gonna be putting something heavier up there, I might want to have a stronger piece of wood, although really this could hold a couple 100 pounds no problem. But it'll certainly hold the bike. So that's what I'm going to use. Otherwise I'd have to go to Home Depot and buy some more lumber. The only thing I need to figure out now is how I'm going to shim it by 18 degrees. Alright, all I really need to do is make a little shim of wood. This is the cross section of this piece. This is the rafter. This is nothing over here except a reference line. Because I don't know exactly where the centers on these rafters are, they're not exactly on 16-inch centers. My plan is to glue the shims onto this board, drill through a clearance for deck screws, and then put the deck screws up into like that. This is already going in as far as this screw needs to go into the rafter, which I think should be plenty. Or I can put a that was a 3-inch. I could put a 3.5 inch in there, and that would probably be fine too. Then the full distance in there is the screw, not just part of it. Again, there's going to be several of these taking the weight, 4 of them to be precise, and the bike only weighs so much, but I think if I can get these to go in without a problem, then I'll use these. If it turns out where they're bulking a little bit, I'll back them out and put in the slightly shorter screw. I think these are both, what are these? They're both 1 pound. Oh, this one's 9 gauge. Okay. Well, I'm going to definitely try to use these longer ones. So it's really just a matter of cutting 4 of these out and gluing them on at the appropriate points on that board, then drilling them through, clearance for these, and then the arduous process of standing on a ladder up in the rafters by myself trying to put this on. Probably I'll start with one of the middle screws and put that on kind of over my head, and then move the ladder and work back and forth, put the other 3 screws in. That's my plan. I just need to manufacture these. Now the cross section of these, it needs to be wider. So this is the rafter here, and I believe this graph paper is on 1/4 inches. So the rafters are 3 or 1.5 inches wide. Yeah, so that's how wide they are, and I'd like the shim to be a little bigger possibly, but I could make these out of 2x4s, and at least the 1 dimension will already be correct because it's already 1.5 inches. Alright, I've got my scrap of 2x4, and I've marked it to shear off the rounded over part at each end, and there's just enough room on here to put 4 of the shims. I'm cutting them a little wider so I have, I can cut them with a bigger saw and lose some wood, as long as I cut on that side of the line and still not hit the part that I need the critical edge here. So that's all built in there. That should work fine. Well, I cut this board a couple inches longer than 50 inches, so 52 inches. That's because I was concerned that from the angle I was measuring things, I might have been a little off. I wanted to have a little run out, and so I actually started 1 inch in. I marked where the first rafter should be, 1.5 inches. Mark that as the rear so I don't get the ends confused. And then I did mark over 16 inches from the center, but then I held this up to the actual rafters while standing on the ladder, and this is where the first rafter is. The second one, the center was about here. I've pretty much erased it, but the rafter is actually here. And the last one, the center should be here, but here's where the rafter actually is. So I'm just going to leave this run out here. It's about 1.25 inches. That way, if it turns out I still screwed something up due to holding this with one hand and measuring and marking with the other hand while standing on a ladder, not advisable, but I really couldn't get 2 people on the ladder. In case it turns out where I need to go further, I can always make an extra wedge and glue it on next to the first one and use this run out as a base for that. Okay, here's the block I cut out of the 2x4. And now for this more delicate stuff, I'm not going to try to use the big saw or the table saw. It's too dangerous and too tricky. So I'm going to use the band saw for this. Okay, there are the wedges, or shims, and they fit down there very nicely, right where I marked the lines. So I'm just going to glue those down. I might put a couple of pin nails in to hold them square. Alright, the wedges are on, glued and pin nailed into position. I don't need to clamp it because the pin nails are holding it down pretty tightly. So I just need to wait for that glue to dry, and then I can drill my mounting holes, which will come up from the bottom and more or less go through the centers of these. I still have to figure out how to put oil in this. It's such a sloppy mess. It doesn't come with any instructions. The manufacturer's website didn't seem to be too helpful in that regard. You know, the oil doesn't want to go in because it has to displace the air, and the only place I can see for the air to come out is the place the oil is going in. So I'm obviously missing some trick, and one of these fine days I've got to get an answer on that. I did manage to get oil in, but I got more oil in the trash can underneath in the process. Well, I took these low ferric content screws that came with the product, and found these very close equivalent screws. The threads aren't quite as deep as on the provided ones, but I don't think that'll be a problem. These are just sheet metal screws, and the head is noticeably smaller. So what I did is I got some flat washers that'll bring it up to about the diameter of the original head. I think that should be okay. Alright, glue's dried and I've put the screw holes through. That's for the deck screws. And I've countersunk for the head of the screw I'm expecting to use, so it doesn't have to pull down into it. And that should leave a flat surface here for mounting the hoist rail. So I think what I'm probably going to do is go up and align, one of these. Probably this one is closest to the head of the ladder. Align that with its rafter. Put the screw in for that, but not all the way. And then move the ladder a bit, and then put in the screws for the other ones. And if it turns out something doesn't line up right, I still have time to take it back down without undoing a bunch of screws. I've made these just slightly undersized, so it still has to thread in there a bit. But, and that's in case I find out these are too long, and I have to use the one size smaller green ones, that'll not be grossly oversized. Let's see. Yeah, they'll stick through that far. I think that would still be adequate. But I'm going to go with the brown ones as I had originally decided, and hope for that to work out the best. I hung my makeshift plumb bob from the right side of the hose reel down and marked it, and from the side of the stuff plus a couple inches from the hoist here, and mark that so I know where I want to center the bicycle. So that's the next step. So I've established the center line of the bicycle. That is where the hoist needs to be above. But I also want to make sure that my handlebars aren't really any wider than that. So I have to get out the old tape measure. It's just over 2 feet wide, and the clearance I have is 30 inches, so it's like 3 inches of clearance on each side. If it hangs a little bit one side or the other, it's still not going to hit the hoist or the cord reel. So that is what I've established there. Now I have to bring that point up to the rafters. I'm going to do that by standing on the ladder and hanging the plumb bob down until it's above that line, and then marking the rafters. Okay, I've marked a rafter with a piece of green tape. I'm hanging my plumb bob down, and the weight is hanging above the green line within a ½ inch, I think. So that's where I need to center this. On the garage floor, I measured with my angle there where the rear of the rear tire and the front of the front tire came. I found the center line between that, marked on that central piece of tape. And then I used the plumb bob to measure up from that and find where the center hole on the hoist rail is and align that. It doesn't have to be centered, but I wanted it to be centered if possible. And then I adjusted the front pulleys and the rear pulleys to be in line with the rear of the saddle and the front of the handlebars, which is where I expect the lower pulleys to be for hooking on the seat and the handlebar. So now I can figure out where in the overall length off the center line, which will be in between the two central joists, I can figure out where I need to mount this rail on the board. Alright, I laid the hoist rail on my wooden beam aligned for where my previous markings indicated it should be. I had to move the brackets for the pulleys in order to access the two mounting holes that are at each end, and of course my pulley brackets were partially covering that. Then there's also a centrally located hole. So what I'm going to do is put pilot holes in those now, and I've marked on the rails where the ends of these pulley brackets need to go, so I won't lose that information. And then I think the next step will be to hang this thing up there and then hang this up there. I can't put that on until this is mounted to the rafters, because these holes have to be accessible. Alright, the new beam is on there with its wedges. With just those 4 deck screws in there, and they're relatively small heads. If I was going to put a lot of weight on this, I would probably put washers on those, but I'd have to countersink them, otherwise the hoist rail wouldn't be able to sit on that surface. So I could beef it up, but I already test hung my weight on it, kind of doing a pull-up while standing on my ladder, and it didn't even creak, so I'm sure it's more than adequately strong for this application. Now I just have to go back up there and put on the rail and adjust the 2 roller brackets or pulley brackets. Alright, that's screwed on there now. Rail to the board. And now I just got to move those pulleys back to where I marked them before. Alright, that's all set, so I don't have to go up on the ladder again, hopefully. I just need to arrange the pull rope. I think I do need to get it over that rafter. It's going to be going down at this angle. I thought about putting another pulley from the hardware store or something like right on that rafter, and you know, having it hang from there, but I just don't see a good way for that to work. I think I'm going to have to put it on a wall stud after all. I think this will be the most logical place to do it. I can reach through and mount it on that brown trim strip, which behind that is a stud in the wall, so that way I can reach through and finagle it, but the cord will still have to go through the ladder, and that's the part I really hate. So I'm thinking what I'll do is go to the hardware store, see if they have any pulleys, and maybe I can bring this cord over to the top of that through a pulley and then down. Add one more pulley to the arrangement. That might work reasonably well. Alright, this is just a test fit before I go further. I'm nearly done, but first time I've been able to actually test the bike pulled fully up against the rafters, so it can't go any higher. The handlebars and seat definitely fit nicely into that space, and indeed I can walk under the wheel with about 2 hand widths, like from there to there, 1, 2, between the bottom of the tire and the top of my head. And if I did run into it, it's just the tire. It's kind of a heavy pull up there, and you really do need to make sure you get it at a good angle coming off that first pulley. It does have a tendency for the heavy end to sag low. So when I was hoisting it up, the rear wheel was lower than the front wheel, and it only recovered when the front wheel went as high as it could up against the rafter Then when I pulled on the rope some more, then the rear wheel raised up. But if you don't have it going up against a couple things like that, if you did this in your garage, you'd probably have an instance where you'd have to try to help the low side up a little bit, try to get it to hang. If you have a big disparity in weight between the front pulley and the rear pulley, you might have more of a problem with it. But in this case, it works out well. You really feel the springiness of the rope when you're pulling up the bike. Now, that was just, again, to verify that everything else was okay. And now I'm going to, right now it's locked up there, that little lock that's on there, so you have to, oh, that's good, it won't release now. Huh. I don't understand what's going on with that. It's holding it by that thing. I think that's supposed to be what releases it. Well, that sucks. Alright, well here's the problem. If you have the pull end of the cord coming out at an angle, which they seem to suggest is what you should do in the instructions, and you're pulling down on it, all you get is this. And that is not enough to bring it past center, or on the other hand, if you were below it and you pull down, then it drops down into that position and stays there. So you really need to be in a position where you can pull straight down on this to get it to release. And that was a problem for my intentions, because I thought it was going to go off at an angle like that. So I like the fact that it's got that brake on it, and that you have to be pulling straight down in order for it to release. Otherwise, otherwise it's going to do that and lock it, which is good. It's just so I think I am going to have to arrange for this to be coming straight down, and just have it hanging there instead of being tied to a cleat, which isn't safe, because they say that auto stop mechanism might not hold under certain circumstances, and you might have the bike come plummeting down. So I'm thinking what I'm going to do is basically allow it to come down on this side of the rafter, and then when I'm tying it off, no longer raising or lowering it, then I can pull it acutely back under the rafter and then anchor it to the wall. I think that'll work. Okay, so now I'm off the ladder, I'm down below. I'm going to just verify that if you pull the cord so it's going straight down and then let loose on it, the bike will lower down. You can get a rope burn from doing this, by the way, unless you kind of do it hand over hand. If you're just trying to let it slip through your fingers, it'll burn you, unless you do it extremely slowly. Okay, back on its wheels again. And the hoist lock has engaged, so the bike's just sitting here as if it was on a kickstand. Alright, so what I've decided to do is I want to have the the bracket they give you to tie off the slack cord. I could put it into the drywall with a couple of drywall anchors, and that would probably be adequate. So I'm going to investigate doing that. Probably put it just like right here next to this shelving unit, so I can still reach through next to the ladder and get at it. And then tie it off there, and that way if the automatic thing way up there lets loose, then it'll still hold it up. Okay, I've got this bracket. I've got these drywall anchors. These are a Buildex brand, which is like part of another well-known brand that I can't think of, Illinois Tool something or another. Anyway, I remember asking for a sample of these things and filled out, or had the person on the phone fill out the order. It was for like, 10 pieces, and they said, oh, we only sample 100 pieces or more. It's like, well, yeah, I'd like to take a sample of 100 pieces. So they sent me this huge box, and I think it had 1,000 of these in it, and it was samples. So I'm still using those, and I probably will for more than the rest of my life. Anyway, so I've got to put those into the two places in the drywall I marked. Okay, both of those are in there now. And now I can put in the number 8 sheet metal screws. I'm going to put them in with washers, even though they probably don't strictly need it. Again, because they recommend using the larger head screws that come with the kit. This is going to build me out to an equivalent head size on the bracket. Alright, so there's that. It's on there pretty good. I wouldn't want to hang from it, but it should be perfectly good for this cord. Alright, so I hoisted it back up there. I'm pulling the cord under the rafter and down to my bracket, where it's hard to do this with one hand, but I think that's about as much as it needs to be, really. So I'm going to cut the cord about here. They say don't cut the cord, but look at all that cord. It's a ridiculous amount. It would always be in the way when I'm trying to wrap things up. So I know I won't use any more than that. And if I did ever repurpose this, I could always buy more cord. I'm sure the hardware store sells something suitable. Alright, I've cut the cord and fused it in a flame. And right now, if you pull up on this really hard, it's not going anywhere because I've got, 6 wraps or something around here. Just the friction going around there. I don't even need to put a knot on this. I can just leave it hang. And I think, yeah, I can't budge this if I pull it. So if that catch up there were to fail for some reason, then this would still prevent it from falling. By the way, the opposite end of the cord, as it came from the factory, is just cut off and the outer fibers melted in a flame, just like what I did. So